I need you to repeat what you just said, please, and thank you, because same.
Yeah, cool. So I was saying how I've been feeling so many big feelings of grief and despair, and I've been really practicing countering it with like a lot of play and silliness and joy and pleasure. It's a lot.
It's so much. I woke up this morning and I journaled. I literally wrote in my journal, do not give in to the despair. And it was because of exactly that. Like, there is
Hmm.
so much to grieve. There's so much space to hold and there's so many things to hold, um, to process. And there's a sense of impossibility to it all.
Hmm.
Which then adds to more of the feeling of wanting to give in to the despair. So finding those moments, those pockets of silliness and, oh shit, it's a miracle that I'm alive and there's a lot of miraculous things around me happening right now is hard and
Hmm.
beautiful and
Hmm.
a lot. So
Hmm.
thanks for paralleling with me. That feels nice. And for
Totally.
the reminder to be silly.
Yeah, right. It's helpful.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
and Tarot the Fool is like the zero card that can like move all around the deck, right? You got to have a little, like, there's a lot of liberatory energy in the trickster energy, right? Like the Joker was like, fuck off the Empire, like
Yeah.
was naming it for what it was, obviously not being like, yay, the Joker. Although, yeah, you know, like not, no.
Everything was done like chaos, but like with a wing. Hmm.
Yeah, it was like, do you see how I'm pointing out how absurd this all is?
Right. The word absurd has come up so much this past year in particular. The absurdity and theater has come up a lot. All of
Hmm.
the acting, the roles, the theater of politics. Just, yep. And
Hmm.
so I had reached out to you to be on the podcast because I know, um, like watching your journey from the outside and you talking about being a therapist and what that meant and the sort of challenges you face with like how we traditionally see therapy or how people think of therapy or problematic ways that therapy has existed historically is something that resonated with me as somebody who has their MSW, somebody that is a social worker, and I still call myself a social worker, even though to other folks, it brings up a certain image of what social work is supposed to be. And I was like,
Hmm.
no, like by definition, a lot of things can fall under the umbrella of social work. And so find myself happily, constantly challenging the definition of what social work is, especially now.
Hmm.
Um, and so I wanted to hear more about your journey as somebody that is holding space for other people, that is helping other folks while also doing your own work of like dismantling shit that we were taught. It don't need to be technical.
Nah,
All the
all
shit that
that
we were
shit,
taught.
all of it.
So I'd love
Yeah.
to learn more about like where you started, where that started, where you're like, some things know that I agree with this, that this is okay or that this best serves humanity, and like where you're at now.
Yeah. Wow. It's been so much. I really appreciate the witnessing and the invitation to be here together in it. I have also really respected and appreciated seeing how you have woven still being a social worker into all the work that you do, because obviously those go together, right? Like the work of the poet is just a different way of doing the work of a social worker. Like you're still like meeting the people in a place of need, you know?
Right.
That's certainly not where I entered into being a counselor, though, you know. Um, and I think, you asked where it started, this kind of like something's off here is really, I would spend I did like a lot of trauma work and would talk about the body a lot because um, I started out teaching like dance fitness and then like that evolved into being in like the yoga world. And then I was like, part of the decolonizing of that was being like, oh, we have really like exploited what yoga is, like what the practice of it is, and being like, maybe I'm not the one to teach it. And, and I had like really resisted getting my license. I was doing those things and I had like gone to school to get my degree. And I'm a systems person. Like my degree is marriage and family therapy. So I like everything makes more sense to me as a system. And once I started like, oh, I'm like a little all over the place. So I'm gonna be like Kenyatta and maybe Brace showing up in my mess too.
We there is plenty of space for that.
Yeah, I'm like noticing the different threads that I'm weaving in my head, and I'm like, will we bring these together? We'll see. Um, but I was doing this body work and I like kind of left the yoga land and I was like, well, I love being with people. I love working in the underworld of whether you call it like psyche or like spirit land, like there's a lot of different ways you can enter it into it. I'm like, I'm there. So I like went ahead and got my license and love doing the work. Like I'm vibing as a therapist. It's like a happy place for me because there's like no small talk and we're like in the muck of life.
Yep. Yep.
But and also the process of like keeping a license, my partner got really sick and I was working at a private practice at the time. And as an attempt to kind of like pull in more income, I was like, oh, I'll do it all myself and be a private practice. And that's how I'll kind of help balance what was happening in like our personal lives. And so that kind of I like went into like hyper mode, like superpower, supercharged mode for like a year or two running a private practice and doing trauma work with folks like in a pandemic where in like the midst of like huge social upheaval.
Yep.
And I was, because I had this like background of like trying to be in my body and these different lenses, I talked a lot about like the parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system and like regulating the body. And you can only talk about those things in so many times without being like, what are the consequences of like heightened cortisol levels? What are the
Hmm.
consequences of your like body and your organs shutting down because you're in this panic state? And that kind of led me into like the somatic world of like trying to understand our bodies and the ways that this parallel things were happening in my life. I was like pushing forward and trying to run a business and trying to do it really well and like being very successful. But also finding like I was running myself into the ground as well as bumping into walls with folks of being like within the therapy land, you actually don't have a lot of language of how to help people like be into their bodies more. And because we want it all to be really intellectual, right?
Right. Right.
But and also all the techniques, like I am an EMDR therapist as well, but like this like bilateral stimulation of the brain is like a very ancient practice. And so as I like uncovered more of the history of these different practices I was doing, um, like CBT and DBT, like all the things, they're all like very colonized practices.
Hmm.
And they're effective. Like different pieces of these things are very effective in helping people, but they don't actually do the work of like moving the material from your brain down into your body so that you're like moving different in the world. We
Hmm.
can think through a lot of different stuff, but if we don't engage the rest of our bodies to integrate it so that we're more whole, right?
Right.
We're just like dissociated or disconnected from ourselves. We are performing. We are in theater. We
Hmm.
are part of this like stage of acting as like like the performance of ourselves, right? Is
Yeah.
that making sense?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're all uh upholding some sort of role and
Yeah.
upholding a role that we may not necessarily want, but we're given, and we are also expecting everybody else to uphold that role as well, even though we know that we don't want ours and they probably don't want theirs, but we're still playing. We're
Yeah.
still in the theater. We don't want to disrupt the show
Hmm.
because the
Yeah.
show has a script. Oh, I'm
Hmm.
putting that in the biggest air quotes because man, the script is also always changing.
Always changing. There are
Mhm.
rules,
Right,
but they read differently depending on who you are, where you're coming from, what the
right.
circumstance is.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know for me when I was in for me the sort of like something's not right here started while I was getting my degree in social work
Hmm.
because even in the teaching itself there was no space for my I know this isn't the same way in every school, but for me when I was going to University of Connecticut, um
Okay.
UConn for some of y'all, I have no school spirit, so y'all gonna
None.
catch all these strays. But I went to UConn and I know not every school works like this, but for our social work program, they had concentrations, and my concentration was community organizing. And there was no good structure for community organizers,
Mm.
meaning we were supposed to, in our 2-year program, we were supposed to have placements where we were out in the community, learning from people who were doing the work, who were doing community organizing. We were, me and other CO majors, we ended up in admin roles. We ended up in, uh, I think they tried to toss us into policy roles, and everybody was just kind of like, this is suspicious. Why aren't we organizing? That's what we're supposed. Why are y'all offering this if you can't give us this thing?
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and so from semester one, I was like, this is weird. What?
Why?
Interesting. So y'all don't know any community organizers? Y'all don't know anybody in like right here in Hartford that's organizing at all? Y'all don't have those connections as an institution to the
As like
community?
your program,
And
that's what it's about?
right. It started there. It grew into also I was on everybody's ass about y'all are gonna change my placement. Ain't no fucking way you're making me pay to come to this school to put me shuffling papers or doing admin work when I'm not supposed to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
Um, Me and UConn got really familiar in those 2 years. So,
Mm.
but then it also evolved into the lack of it evolved into a lack of the arts being highlighted in any of the work in no matter what your concentration was. There was no talk about the arts or culture when it came to social work. And
Hmm.
me and a few other students had staged a what we called an art in, where we took over the whole school and we chalked
Wow.
up the sidewalks outside, and I did an open mic outside, and um, they were at the time, there was a lot of work happening around immigration and immigrant rights. And so we just took over the whole building. And it was also like, this is another thing that's sort of missing. Like, why aren't we talking about the ways that different groups of people organize, do social work that's culturally relevant to them, that speaks to the arts, in their communities, in their cultures, um, because every culture around the world has all of these ingredients. Everybody has music, everybody has
Mhm.
storytelling of some sort, everybody has
Mhm.
food, everybody has gathering in some way. And we're not talking about those things, but we're talking about social work. It highlighted to
Yeah.
me how very individualized this shit is. Again, my concentration was community organizing. There was no community organizing, but there was plenty of people, there was plenty of roles where it was all about like one-on-one and very clinical. And so
Hmm.
I didn't have the wording at the time, but I was like, oh, okay, this is all about like upholding the individual and highlighting the individual and being up here all the time. Exactly like you said, like, no, we figure it out up here and then everything else will be solved. And you have to
Yeah.
figure it out on your own, by the way. This is a you thing. This is a you problem. This is a you thing to solve. You need to figure it out intellectually, and
Hmm.
then things will be quote unquote fixed. You will be healed.
Yeah.
And so that the seed was planted pretty early on where I was like, there's some
Wow.
problems here. I didn't realize how problematic it was. Obviously, they're not going to tell you how shitty they are.
Right. Right. They're like, "Psst, P.S. This is real shit. Sign right here. That's 50 grand. Thank you. Cool, cool, cool. Thanks for
With
this.
that, I think that's what stuck out to me the most was like, oh, this is very much about the individual person. And
Mm,
um and it took a long time. I got my degree in 2013, and it took now, yeah, like over 10 years to be like, oh, this is all of us. It's a yes and. It took a long time to get to yes and. It is, yes, there are things there's work that we have to do in ourselves for ourselves. And also, you are bound to the person next to you. You are bound to the person that's across the sea. You are bound to the person on the other side of the planet. Um, and everything that's happening to them is happening to you and vice versa.
mhm.
And we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's intentional, right? Because
Mm,
the institutionalization of like, okay, it's all through a colonial lens. All of our
mm,
systems and structures are through an empire, through a purpose of profit and exploitation. And that includes our institutions and the way that we talk about organizing or doing care or taking care of our
mm,
mental health. It's still through this very institutionalized, individualistic, intellectualized, with the same rules that compel empire forward.
mm, mhm,
Like, I really appreciate this seed for you being planted in school because I was in Atlanta in a Christian graduate program. And my background, I
It's
grew
not,
up,
I was not expecting that plot twist.
listen, I have many of them. Buckle up. I don't really, but maybe we'll see. You know, I grew up in Georgia, right? On the
I
land of the
didn't. Oh,
Cherokee. I grew up in the foothills of like Appalachia. Like my people are like hill, like my dad's family is like hill folks, you know?
mhm.
And like speaking of fucking flooded off and just like Eastern Seaboard floating away and like okay, that's a whole thing that I'm gonna get lost in if uh-huh. So like that's where I grew up, right? And I went to UGA, so like thank you for that. Like the story was when I was in high school that it was like the most liberal school and how it would like change your kids. It was like scary. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. Okay, so like it was like you know, whatever stereotype
Especially now
that
that I'm in the
brings to
South,
mind.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
you know. So so when I was in school, I was getting like a sex therapy certificate along with my degree. And let me just tell you, that sex therapy degree was still within the framework. It was considered like liberal because we actually like talked about body parts and like
Hmm.
talked about orgasm and like talked about safe sex because, you know, that was like, ooh, you're like actually talking about the thing. But that is all related to in school, I was still following this path that led me to getting a license and then taking insurance, and insurance takes up hours of your time, and insurance is not meant to actually be helpful to the provider or the person they're serving. And people are like paying into these programs to try to have access to mental health care, but then it's just like hoop city. And so I didn't have any part of like my unraveling as a therapist has been like the whole fucking thing just fell apart
Mm.
because I tried to build, I was like, let me build the perfect private practice that serves exactly what, like, as a person who has sensitivities and needs, I like catered it to those, right? Like to take care of how do I, and had the privileges and access to be able to do so, right? And then still, even doing it that way, I had my partner who like is like a systems brilliant human to like help me figure out how to manage all the things. I lasted 3 years running a private practice between all the hours we put in arguing with insurance companies to get paid and never being able to keep up with the demand for therapists who were I can like post leaving the world, I like got a lot of the like decolonizing therapy language, but I didn't have it when I was actually doing it. And I just was like, I'm approaching it humanely. Like when people are like, I'm so tired, I'm like, yeah, you're up against a capitalistic system that needs you to work 3 jobs to be able to afford your rent that you might just lose at any second.
Mhm.
And like, no, you're actually not crazy. Your family's been lying to you for generations because that's how colonization is compelled forward. Like, no, you're actually not crazy. Yeah, you're anxious because they're dropping bombs on people and like everybody's talking about an iPhone and like the world's falling apart. You know, it's just
Right.
like, come
It
on.
just makes sense. Yes.
You're like, actually, no, you're not crazy.
Right. And it perpetuates the idea of like, oh, it's just me. Like I need to fix, I'm anxious. How do I not feel anxious? Like,
Oh,
no, love, you are again tied to the human being that is currently getting bombed. Like that is humanity. You're part of it. You're gonna be feeling it because you are part of it. And there is no level of like spiritual detachment. Oh Lord, I can shit talk them all day. But
hmm.
spiritual detachment or like amount of therapy that is going to make up for uh that sort of like hold there's no amount of individual therapy or self-care that you can do that is going to take the place of the need for like communal grieving, for communal healing. There's a part of you that needs to do that with other people.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that like there's no amount of like DBT or EMDR that's going to like fix your shit individually that is not supremely impacted and tied to the like sorry, just as I was saying that I completely lost my train of thought.
That's
Um
okay.
it just like
That's okay.
hold on, but it was nice. I think it went together. Where did it
Let me know if you
go?
want me to repeat the thing.
Yeah, yeah, do that.
All right, let's see if we can spark it again. I said
Yeah.
there is no amount of individual therapy or self-care that is going to make up for the fact that that there's a part of us that also needs to grieve in community and that requires healing in community with other people.
Right. Right. Yes. And to say that, like Indigenous folks talk about colonization being a process of soul loss.
Mm, mm,
There, there ain't no therapists that singularly, individually is coming to fix that with you. Just like you said, like that's the thing, you got to put your warm body next to other warm bodies and you got to dance and you got to make food together and you got to remember that you like belong to one another and like to the earth and that
mm.
that's like real, that we all come from that. Like there's so many good techniques, there's so many good ways to practice being together that are super healing. That and like healing is a word that I mean, I grew up in the church. It can be like such a huge trigger for people. People have been so gaslighted.
Yeah,
But also, dude, like the fucking magic of being together is healing. Like
yeah.
it is good to remember our stories and to connect with one another. And like, you're not getting that sitting like this.
Right.
download in all of your fears and insecurities and shames, which are valid. Like we have been inundated with reasons to hate ourselves and hide ourselves and shame ourselves and belittle ourselves and think that just like eat the poison, we're the problem. And the normalization of just like the humanity we share that happens when, I mean, like that's kind of the beauty of like AA, like things, the reason that like things like that, there are many problems with them. But the reason that people are still like, I got to go to a group is like, let's put our warm bodies next to each other. Let's drink this hot drink and let's like talk about our woes.
Yeah.
And so like to where we started with this conversation, it's like the mutual aid
Yeah.
of I'm like bring back community witches, like bring back the community healers. That's like let me offer, like I have this offering of handiwork. Can you help me with my emotional and mental and spiritual woes, you know?
Yeah.
Like really I'm so interested in how we can do that better together because these hierarchies be so silly and so violent and toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were talking earlier, you were, there was something you had said earlier that brought up even in me, like my own conditioning around like who's a professional, right? Like if I'm looking for a mental health professional, if I'm looking for, I don't know, somebody heal, whatever healing it is that I'm looking for, whatever modality it is that I like want to partake in, like that I'm looking for the professional. And it's like it's this thing that we uphold of like who paid the most, who has the most pieces of paper that say that they are now the expert in your healing, when sometimes it's your grandma, sometimes
Hmm.
it's your homies kicking it with you on the back porch.
Hmm.
It's it is your friendly neighborhood witch. Like it it can be those things because that acknowledges like the history of colonialism and the uh, the appropriation of healing in general,
Hmm.
really. Like it can
Yeah.
only be done this way, and it can only be done by these people, and it can only be done with like this education that we have deemed important. Um, and it's just wild. It steals access from so many people when it
Hmm.
used to be that you were in a community, you lived way too close with many other people, and you were interacting with them all the time, whether you liked it or not. And yes,
Yeah.
it was rough, but you also always, always had community.
Yeah.
And now we don't have that. We have all this quote unquote connection, and yet such a huge lack of it. Like people feel so incredibly lonely.
So fucking lonely. It's, and you can see it in like every sect of people. Like you can see the loneliness and the patterns of behavior of folks, like
Mhm.
the gun violence, the suicide. It's just like the bombs. Ah,
Right.
it's like you can see how we've really lost the thread and how empire is not in any of our institutions, right? Like we really the last year and a half has really forced me to reckon with how like and this is like nothing new. This is what indigenous and black and brown and folks of color through the ages have been saying, but like America does not hold the solutions, right? Like and all the imperializing nation states across the globe are not holding solutions even in like I know people doing great good medicine work, but if it is not telling the truth about our whole history of us as like
Mm,
people groups, it's lacking a really important part that's really important for this moment right now.
right.
That like this moment is like a moment where we all really need to remember like our heart and just like the beauty of the fucking sun rising
Yeah.
and how that matters. Like taking care of the earth like actually really matters for all of us, you know? Like
Uh-huh.
what
Yeah.
an idea. But and also it's like those basic deceptions and illusions that people have of empire that we could even believe. We've been so tricked to even believe that we are so alone. And that's a
Mhm.
huge mental health issue.
Right.
And then we
Right.
have this shame on top of it that we like don't like people don't even know how to say it. Don't even know. That's something that I've always been really grateful. Like you have helped me in so many ways. Also just like say it. Like let's say the thing. I've always really loved saying the thing. And I really appreciate when you do that too, because we all need everybody. That is a mental health matter too. All of us actually saying, ouch, this hurts. Oh no, this is intolerable. This actually is beautiful. This feels really good. Like the severance from our body to sense and feel into the world, like how it is impacting us is like bad for us.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
And so I think the more that we can do, and I feel like this is the question that people are having conversations around everywhere I look about, like, how do we actually do community?
Mhm.
And we're now in this place that's like, I don't know, I feel like everyone needs to be like that good trickster energy again and being messy and embracing, like,
Yeah.
I think if we all just started telling the truth with one another and be like, there's some overlap in our needs and our gifts, and I think that we could really meet each other
Yeah.
much more abundantly than we imagine. I think. I think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Concur.
Yeah.
Cosign.
People are doing it.
Just all the things.
Yes.
Right. And and I don't always want it to come to a point where there's a disaster in order for us to do that, in order for that to be inspired. Um, like I saw, and it was beautiful. I like after I'm in North Carolina, and with what happened with the hurricane and what happened in Western North Carolina, in Asheville and other cities. It wasn't just
Hmm.
Asheville. Asheville got a lot
Hmm.
of attention, and I think that's unfortunate. There were plenty of other places that were also impacted by it in North Carolina
Hmm.
and in other states, not just here.
Yeah.
But the way that I guess I'll call us everyday folks were just rising up to the occasion and being like, I don't have a lot, but I can do this. I can drive up there with supplies if y'all are willing to come up with supplies. I can give money. I can't leave my house, but I can send you something. I can like there's it
Mm-hmm.
was really beautiful to see community not wait on like fucking FEMA or the Red Cross.
Hmm.
Y'all are awful. Anybody from FEMA or Red Cross listening, you're awful. And I hope y'all do better because I will never forget how y'all handled Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I am holding on to that. And I will bring that up every single time.
Mm.
So, anyways,
Say
um,
it.
people weren't waiting. They weren't waiting for somebody to come like rescue
Yeah.
them. They were like, no, we got this. We're gonna do something. Um, or even coming up with like routes for how to get people out of there.
Hmm.
Um, and it was beautiful to see that. And there's a part of me that was still like, I wish it didn't take this. I wish it didn't take so much harm and hurt and I don't know, pain to get to the point of
Yeah.
like loving up on each other the way that we should.
Yeah.
Because chances are people needed things prior to
Yeah.
a quote unquote natural disaster. It's a man-made disaster. Human-made
Yes.
disaster?
Human
I'm gonna
made.
say man. Uh
Man made. Yeah. Yes, it is.
there was there was something that I read on Substack
Hmm.
that made me go, hmm. And I wanted to bring it up to you. I was saving it for this episode because I'm like, I want to know what Emily's thoughts are on that.
Okay, I'm
So
so excited.
somebody wrote that self-care that self-care can be a form of self-colonization. And I said, huh? And
Hmm.
things that make you go, hmm.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've been sitting with that ever since. I saw it maybe a day or two ago. And I was like, well, that's a thought. Is that? is that what we're trying to do? Because immediately what my gut said was like, yeah, that's kind of what self-care is sounding like these days. And it's like, how do I better myself? How do I heal myself? Which is really like, I want to get rid of this ugliness inside of me and
Mhm.
be a quote unquote good person, a better person, a more normal person, whatever that means. Um,
Hmm.
and so I was like, huh, self-care as a form of self-colonization.
Hmm.
Huh. Thoughts? Questions, comments, concerns, accusations.
Okay, so I mean, like, yeah, in the sense that, like,
I love that both of our guys just like, yeah.
I mean, like, I can see it, yeah, because
Mm,
right, it depends on what self-care are you talking about,
mm,
and what is the approach to doing the care
mm,
that you're doing it with, right? Because it can be like, let me groom myself, let
yeah,
me aesthetically please you to be a better performer in
yeah,
this little world, like, and that can be a form of self-colonization. It is real. The aesthetics of it all is like be in your power, be in your beauty for sure. And yeah, totally. And the way that we approach self-care is this idea, the way that some approach it as this idea of like you said, let me better myself so that I don't have to deal with my shadow. I can heal everything and then I'll be shiny and new and won't have to deal with anything uncomfortable ever again. You know, that is also a form of like tearing yourself down, right? Because you actually need to feel. It's a way you gather information in the world. You actually need to sense about the things around you. And so you're always going to be messy. Like you're just a little meat sack, electric little person, creature, just like walking around
yeah.
feeling shit, you know? And so to like, if the care isn't about tending to ourselves in a way that like remembers we're a part of a whole, we can get really lost in it. It can get really like self-centered is like a easy way I think to put it.
Yeah.
And just like it is good to take care of ourselves, and capitalism will take all of our resources,
Mm,
and the people and the institutions around us will work us and have. I mean, you know, and like I mean, we have multiple emergencies happening right now, and we don't have solutions as institutions, as government. Our solutions have been like, let's bomb other folks some more, not
mm.
let's take care of anybody, not let's send resources and support. And oh, sorry, it's just if our movement in tending to ourselves does not move us inherently more towards other folks, we're very, very unlikely to actually get to where we're trying to go.
That was so well put.
Thanks.
What's the world you're envisioning? What's it
Hmm.
look like? What are we doing? What are we listening to? What shenanigans are we up to?
Okay. It's very lush, you know.
Great word. Lush. Hmm.
It's lush, like there's a cool breeze and you can hear birdsong and there's water flowing and the people in their bodies. I particularly all the colonized folks across the globe who have bore in their bodies the weight of carrying people forward are at rest and eating fruit from a tree and getting to move through the world in ways that feel purposeful and connective. Like we all have a craft that we like to do. We all like to tinker on something and sharing that together in ways that like I feel like we can have communities that are like we can get out of our Americanized little houses and boxes and we can like actually meet one another and talk to each other. I envision there being a lot of laughter and orgasms and storytelling and music and like there being fires going. And I have a very simple envision for the future. Um, Me and I don't really need very much. I like I've I really get like all the fancy shiny things of the world, but like as a sick, debilitated person, I'm like, let's just, if we can just like lay among some flowers, like maybe like pet a cow and everyone can be like doing things that feel good to them. I think I don't, I don't need much more than that.
Might need to name this episode Pet a Cow now. Petting a cow.
It's good repair to pet a cow. It'll repair something in your spirit, I swear. Hug a cow, just like, just like lay on the cow.
Just the idea is making me happier already. So I
Good
agree.
for you.
Yeah, this is fine
I'm
by
telling
me.
you. I'm telling you, the people are beautiful. Like the normal people, we're all, what you said earlier was so about folks coming together and taking care of one another post a hurricane. It's like, we're so powerful. And like, most of the world is just regular people. That like the whole narrative around there not being regular people and like keeping up with the Joneses is like, honestly, you got to really do some mental gymnastics to be like, yeah, this is the thing we still should be doing.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Once we strip away
so,
like all this, all the stuff and just like, oh, we should just be there for one another. Once we get rid of what you mentioned, the hoops, all the hoops that people need to jump through in order to be deemed worthy of love, attention, care, housing, safety, life,
mhm,
would make a lot, it would make everything so much simpler, so
mhm.
much easier, so much more loving, which is how it should be.
Yeah,
Even
I
it,
would,
it
no, go
reminded
ahead.
me of a, and then it reminded me of an episode that I recorded with Ash Blount, where the title
Mhm.
of it was like, even if I don't fuck with you, I still want to see you get free. And it's kind of like
Yes.
that. That's a very loving thing to say and to do because
Yeah.
it gets rid of the hoops. Please tell me what you were going to say.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's it. And I think, there's so many ways to envision a future. And it can be as simple as just saying, like, I think everybody deserves housing and dignity and how they get to live their lives. And like, I know things have gotten so politicized and like America is like such a violent state and like it's just all so normalized. But
Mhm.
like, it's not actually radical to just say, like,
Right.
people deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, like across the board.
I was just
And
thinking
that
that.
like
Mhm.
labor is ought to be honored and that like we don't have to, it doesn't have to be this violent and exploitive. So like, I don't know, I have really simple envisions for the future, but they're just like, hey, everybody gets taken care of, you know?
Yes. Not a
Right?
radical idea at all. And yet, but not.
Like, oh, I see you're so angry about that. Okay. Why?
Right. What part of you is not being taken care of, or what part of you has been to be threatened by the idea of everybody being well, everybody being taken care of? You should not be threatened by the idea of everybody being okay.
Yeah. Well, and that gets kind of like at the root of it, right? That like something that I talk about a lot with folks is that like we, I think of like whiteness like a cult. It's
Mm.
like the indoctrination. You can't, I don't know if you can appreciate like how the the results, the consequences of the ways that we have moved through history and the like violence of segregation and the homogeneity pursued. It's like people be brainwashed because we were inundated with messaging of how to move through the world and what to believe as kids.
Yeah.
We did not know. And like, yes, responsibility and accountability for the violences, like individually and like collectively, that have been committed is important and
Yeah.
important part of repair. And I think it's really important that we all be honest that like one thing I started telling clients is like, I was like, your trauma isn't special. Your suffering, not unique. Like the legacy of colonization is it's fucking violent.
Right.
And like to perform it is a violent act
Hmm.
against self and neighbor, you know? And so I think like really being honest with like how much violence has taken place and like how much that has been normalized is like really important for any conversation that we're trying to have about mental health because it's not good. And you can look at it and be like, okay, well, if we look at privilege, right, and like white cis het men ought to be like sitting large, living happy, right?
Hmm.
But I don't know, the numbers of suicide among them just tell me it's not really doing a good thing for them, you know? And the amount of
Hard.
violence that they're like, I can go out into the world and I feel so alone, insecure, unthinking, ignorant,
Hmm.
fearful, whatever. I feel the need to go out into the world and do this. But that is a violence that happens here too.
Hmm.
So like I'm like liberation or bust, baby, because it it just is like enough is enough. And folks been saying this for a long time. So like it has been enough is enough.
Hmm.
But you
Yeah.
know, from the river to the sea, it's about fucking time,
Correct.
you
A
know.
1000%. Well, this was
Oh,
delightful.
delightful. Okay, do we have time for me to tell you about how we met?
Do we have
Have I told you?
time? Yes,
Can
we
I tell
have.
you this?
Yes, tell me, please.
Okay,
Got the
so
coffee out and everything.
get it out. Okay, so we had just moved to New Haven, my partner and I was like diving in, getting to know the community and like getting connected here and there. And so MLK weekend of 2018 and 19, one Zulynette performs at the Peabody
Yeah, I did.
twice, 2 years in a row. Was there a contest? Did you win?
It was a contest. I think I did not win those years. I think I
Placed.
won 2020. Oh, I did place. I did place.
You did. Because I was like, what?
And then I think I won 2020. Oh, I hate saying the year 2020.
No.
It started off so well. And then I did win 2020. Did I? No, still placed. There's this fucking guy. Shout out to him though. He's a great poet. Anywho, go on.
Anyways, shout out to him. Shout out to you. Shout out to the great poets.
Hmm.
But I okay, so I don't remember what you spoke, but I remember how I felt when you performed.
I actually remember
And
2018 was a poem about Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico because it happened in
mm,
2017.
that
That's
makes
that's
sense.
exactly what it was.
Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense. Because
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, it was literally like lighting a candle. I was like, you fucking this person like told the whole truth. It was like a fire burn, like when you need to clear the land, you just like I was like, damn, you can just do that? You could just you could just get up there and fucking breathe fire. I was like, well, I think I need to get some new goals, I think.
Oh, my heart. Oh, feeling feelings.
Feeling feelings. It was
Thank you for
great. I'm
sharing
just so
that.
appreciative. Yeah, I'm appreciative. I'm just grateful for you as an artist, as a worker, as a community organizer and member of the community. I'm grateful because
Same. Same. I'm glad to be in community with you and to see you being a fellow person who's like questioning everything, but not just questioning everything, but also using energy, time, and space to imagine what else. Because when I was back in my previous life as a research facilitator, uh,
what a
that's a
life.
that's a whole 5-part series podcast. Anyways,
I'm here
um,
for it.
I would tell my students, hey, you can critique all you want, you can critique all day, we can critique till we're blue in the face. What are we going to do about it? What are you imagining then? What's going to be in its stead? What's going to take up the space? If we get rid of this thing, what's going to be there?
Mhm.
Because now there's a vacuum. So what are we imagining then if we are
Yeah,
to get rid of a thing, dismantle a thing? And I really appreciate that you do the yes and.
thanks. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I think I'm looking at leaders who know how to relate to grief. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I think I believe that you can find a future forward. Like
Yeah.
folks who are like, I know how to deal with all this here that is like the real reckoning of like being in this moment and trying to tend to one another.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I'll follow you because we're gonna have to grieve to like plant new seeds of like doing that reimagining of being together. Like we gotta clear some stuff out. You gotta say some truths.
Mhm.
So yeah, thanks.
Of course. Thank you. This is a great way to end this. I appreciate you. Thank you so
Yeah, I
much.
appreciate you.